December 1944, the Saar Frontier. The air smelled of wet ash and iron. A narrow farm road stretched through eastern France toward the German border, flanked by skeletal trees and the burned shells of abandoned wagons. The war had passed through here in waves, once with hope, then with fury, and now with exhaustion. American infantry companies moved slowly, cautiously, through countryside that had learned to distrust silence. In late 1944, quiet didn't mean peace. It meant someone was waiting. Outside a cluster of stone farm buildings, an American rifle company came to a halt. The structures ahead were half collapsed, roofless in places, their walls scarred by shrapnel. Recon patrols reported a German rear guard still dug in, small, isolated but present. No artillery, no reinforcements, just a handful of men refusing to move. The company commander sent a squad forward to investigate. They expected either an empty ruin or hands raised in surrender. Instead, a single rifle shot cracked across the frozen field and struck the mud near their boots. Then another. Controlled. Deliberate. The Americans pulled back. Through field glasses, an officer studied the largest building. A figure appeared briefly in the doorway. A German officer, older, wearing a long coat and field cap, binoculars hanging from his neck. He didn't shout. He didn't wave a weapon. He simply watched. Prisoners captured earlier that morning had mentioned him. A major. Eastern Front veteran. A man who had already decided how this day would end. The Americans brought up a loudspeaker. A corporal fluent in German called out the standard terms. You are surrounded. Lay down your weapons. You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. The response was a rifle shot fired into the sky. Then silence. They tried again, louder this time, more direct. The major's voice came back, calm, measured, almost polite. He refused. He stated his rank, his orders, his position. He said he would not surrender. There was no anger in his tone, only certainty. The American lieutenant lowered his binoculars and looked at the men beside him. They were soaked through, hollow-eyed, moving on instinct and coffee. Some hadn't slept in 3 days. None of them wanted to die for a farmhouse that didn't matter anymore. But the road mattered. Higher command was notified. The reply was swift. Do not bypass. Do not leave hostiles in your rear. Resolve it. Mortars were positioned. Machine gun teams took cover behind low stone walls. But the company commander paused. By December 1944, many officers had learned that not every problem required immediate violence. He ordered one more attempt. A white cloth was tied to a rifle and an unarmed sergeant walked halfway down the road, hands visible, calling out in German. The major stepped into full view. He listened. The sergeant repeated the terms: medical care, warm food, survival. The major responded slowly. He said his men were finished. He knew the war was lost. But surrender for him was not a tactical calculation. It was personal. He had retreated too far already. He would not retreat again. The sergeant asked how many men he commanded. The major didn't answer. Instead, he asked a question of his own. How much time will you give us? The sergeant returned. The exchange was relayed. The American commander considered it, then made a decision that surprised his platoon leaders. He gave them 1 hour. 1 hour to reconsider. 1 hour before the assault began. His men settled into positions. Rifles rested against cold stone. Mortar crews waited in silence. 40 minutes in, there was movement. A young German soldier emerged from a side building, hands raised, trembling. He said the major had released him, told him to surrender if he wished, that no one would stop him. Within minutes, 2 more followed, then another. The Americans waved them through, searched them gently, wrapped them in spare wool blankets. At the end of the hour, the major still stood in the doorway. The assault was brief and overwhelming. Machine gun fire suppressed the windows. Mortars landed behind the buildings, cutting off escape rather than obliterating the structures. Infantry moved in short rushes, using walls and ditches for cover. The Germans returned fire, but weakly. Their ammunition was nearly gone. Their resistance was symbolic. Within 15 minutes, it ended. Smoke drifted across the yard. A wounded German soldier cried out for help. An American medic moved toward him immediately, without waiting for permission. Inside the main building, the major sat at a wooden table. His pistol lay beside him, unloaded. His gloves were folded neatly next to it. He stood when the Americans entered. He did not raise his hands until ordered. The lieutenant, mud-streaked and breathing hard, studied him for a long moment. Through an interpreter, he asked, "Why didn't you surrender when you had the chance?" The major answered without hesitation. He said surrender should be earned, not requested, that an officer's duty was to resist until resistance no longer held meaning, that he wanted his men to see he did not abandon his post lightly. The lieutenant nodded. He had heard similar words before. Some made sense, others didn't. He ordered the major searched and escorted outside. What happened next was quiet, almost unremarkable. The major was offered a cigarette. He declined at first, then accepted. The Americans did not strip his insignia or shove him forward. They did not mock him. One soldier, noticing the major's boots were soaked through, gestured toward a fire barrel where other prisoners were being allowed to warm themselves under guard. The major hesitated, then walked over. Later, during processing, the Americans learned more. The major had served since before the war. He had lost a son on the Eastern Front. He had no illusions left. That night, he was fed the same rations as the men guarding him. When asked by an intelligence officer if he regretted his refusal to surrender earlier, the major paused. He said he regretted the delay, but not the decision. He said the Americans had proven something to him, not through force, but through restraint. In the weeks that followed, the incident barely appeared in official reports. A minor skirmish, several prisoners taken, no American casualties. In the scale of the war, it was nothing. But for the men who were there, it remained. They remembered the officer who chose resistance even when it changed nothing. They remembered the decision to wait rather than destroy. And they remembered that surrender, like refusal, was not always about ideology or loyalty. Sometimes it was about dignity. Sometimes it was about how a war ends, not in victory or defeat, but in the small choices made when the fighting becomes unnecessary. That is the part history often forgets, but it is the part worth remembering.